Okay, today we're going to create a new composition using line and scale, meaning we're going to be using some of the line tools in Illustrator and the scale tool as well. So let's just get started. Let's open up the Illustrator application, and it'll take it a minute to load the fonts and plugins. So it may take it a minute to do that. There we go. Always a good idea to try to keep only a couple applications open at a time while you're working. Um, just depends on how much RAM you have on your computer, but just working in Illustrator at the moment. Always a good idea to try to limit those applications that are open on your desktop. All right, updating the font menu, it will do that. By the way, the more fonts you have, the longer it's going to take to load. So if you have a slow computer, you might think about eliminating some of your fonts or managing them with an application like Adobe Type Manager. Okay, so we're getting ready to start a new document. File, New, and create a new document. And what I'm going to do is create a different size document today. I'm just going to type in 11 and 11. Now, before you do that, you might want to make sure that it's set to inches and not any of these other settings, because once we get started, you really don't want to have to go change that. So make sure that's set to inches. I'm going to type in 11 by 11. So we're going to be working in 11 by 11 document, and just kind of leave those set to default. And we're going to end up with a blank document that's 11 by 11. And anytime you want to reset your workspace, let's say your palettes get out of control, I could just go to workspace and reset essentials. So this should look pretty close to what you have, unless you've brought out some palettes. One of the palettes we are going to need today is the layer palette, because we're going to work with layers. And one of the things I want to do, we can grab those tabs and kind of pull those around where we need them. But this first layer, we're going to create a background color in Illustrator. Really, you don't start with a document background color, so I'm going to create a shape and fill it with a color. I'm just going to double click to rename, call that background, and that'll work for us. And right now you'll see that I'm set to white and with a black stroke. Well, I'm just going to start without a stroke on this shape. Okay, basically I'm just going to use a rectangle and create a background. So I'm just going to be a nice light yellow color, something like that, and then just click and drag to cover my white area. Okay, so that's how we create a background color in Illustrator. You can kind of see I can turn that off and on, or we can lock it right there. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and save this because I really want to save this into my desktop folder as I'm working, and I've created a folder. It's called RMCAD assignments, and I have a week number 2 assignment. There's another one I was kind of working on earlier, but I'm going to call this assignment 2. I'm just going to overwrite that one. There we go. And just want to make sure that I'm working in Adobe Illustrator, and I'm saving it as an AI. Okay, so Adobe Illustrator AI. And there's my background. I can turn that off and on. And I have it saved now. Anytime you see the asterisk, means you haven't saved in a while, so you want to save often just to make sure if your system crashes, you have everything saved. Alright, the next thing I'm going to do is create a new layer, and you can do that by going over here to this little button, or you can create it from down here as well. But I'm going to just click that and get another layer. But what I like doing, I'm going to just throw that layer away by clicking the trash button, is doing it here, because when I do it here, then I can name my layer, and I'm going to call this line tool, because I'm going to be using some of the tools over here to create a composition. And I'm going to start with this tool. This is the line segment tool. There's also some other tools there. You're more than welcome to get in and kind of experiment with those, but I'm just going to be using the segment tool. I'll also be using the paintbrush, the pencil tool, and the rectangle tool as well, maybe some of these other shapes. It's kind of making a little more complicated composition. Now, before I start drawing, I want to make sure I lock that background layer so we're not working in that layer. I want to make sure I'm drawing in the line tool layer. And right now, if I draw anything, it's going to have a yellow fill with no stroke. Usually when we're using the line tool or the paintbrush or the pencil, we're going to put a stroke on it. We might put a fill on it, but usually we're putting a stroke on it. So I'm going to take the fill off, and I'm going to start with a red stroke. There we go. And I use the line segment tool first, and I make sure I'm in that layer. And I'm going to start with a 1-point stroke, and I just want a basic line. Okay, these are the attributes of my stroke up here. Let's just start with a uniform, so set that to uniform and basic. And this tool works this way. I'm just going to click and drag, okay, and that'll just drag it, make it from point to point. If you click, it's going to ask you for length and angle. But we're just doing freehand right now, so it's click and drag, 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 click and drag. And I go down here and do that as well. Now you notice I'm going off the edge of the document. Or this is the document, the black line, and this is called the pasteboard. And we can save stuff on that. It comes in handy sometimes. I'm just going to kind of do something like that, real simple. Now let's say that we want to go in and kind of change the color or the stroke weight of that line. I'm just going to go in and kind of, let's make it a little thicker. That one a little thicker as well. That one a little thicker. Oop, make sure you got a selection. All right, I'll talk about that selection tool here in just a little bit. I'm just going to increase the line weight of a couple of these. Okay, at any time if you need to pause the video and kind of experiment, you're more than welcome to do that. It's the best way to learn. Okay, so I have some strokes. Well, maybe I want to change the color, so I can select that stroke right there and double click and get me another color. Let's try a blue. Well, don't really like that, so I'll go to edit undo. Okay, so you got lots of undos you can try. And that looks pretty good. So I'm going to lock that layer. Okay, now I'm going to unlock it real quick because I want to show you the two tools up here at the top. These are real important. This is the, if you mouse over it, the selection tool. The selection tool selects the whole object. You see that? And this is the direct selection tool, which selects parts of the object. So if I want to grab an end of one of these, hold on a second. If I want to grab the end of one and move it, that's the tool I'm going to need to do that. Sometimes it gets a little hard to get those end, we call those nodes, get them and move them around. You might want to practice that a little bit. Let me move that back. Okay, so I'm going to lock that tool. That layer, and let's create a new layer, and we're going to call this the paintbrush layer. And we're going to use the paintbrush on this layer, and the green is just going to kind of indicate what layer you're on over here. Don't worry about these settings, just kind of leave them set to default for now. And I'm going to make sure I lock the line layer so I'm not working in the line layer. I want to make sure I'm in the paintbrush layer. And layers work similar to a cake. Whatever on bottom is on bottom. Whatever is on top is on top visually. So if I start working with the paintbrush right now, I'm going to end up with a red stroke. And if you click that, you can get some settings. Any tool, you can double click and get some settings. And I'm just going to set it, leave it set to about right there. It's kind of whatever it's set to is fine for now. We can go back and set that later, but I'll just click OK. And if I start drawing right now, I'm going to get a red paintbrush. Well, I want it to be a little different, so I'm going to make it a green paintbrush. And I'm going to turn my line layer off just for a moment, just to kind of see what I'm doing. And then I'm going to start painting. Okay, kind of see how that's working. I'm just going to go around and let's just paint a little bit. Come around here. All right, that looks good. And at the moment, it's just a green stroke, and I can go in and change the weight a little bit. I kind of like that, a nice thick stroke. Okay, call that the line is a line, but until we put a stroke on it, that's what gives it the weight. Okay, so it says stroke weight, and I kind of like that. All right, let's turn the line tool on, and you can kind of see that this is covering up most of my lines down in the corner, so I'm going to use the opacity tool to kind of bring the transparency down a little bit. That's kind of like that. All right, let's go ahead and lock that. All right, now the next tool I'm going to use, let's create a new layer, and I'm going to call this the pencil layer. And on this one, we're going to use the pencil tool. Okay. There's some other tools under there, but for now, let's just use the pencil tool. And what we want to do is let's create a blue on here so you can kind of see what we're doing. And the pencil tool works a lot like the paintbrush tool. You can get a lot of the same effects with both tools. So I'm just going to go in and I'm going to draw more jagginess with this one. Okay, more straight. Just kind of get in there and make some straight ones. Okay, it might take it a minute to catch up because it's got to calculate all those angles. And kind of like that, I'm going to bring the stroke weight up a little bit, like that. And let's kind of turn these two layers up. Just want to see what I got. Okay, now remember, if we use this direct selection tool, we select the whole object. So I can move it around. I can also grab the corners of these nodes and scale it up and down. Again, if you need to pause this and kind of play with it, that's fine. Now this direct selection tool, what that will do is I'm going to click off deselect. I'm going to select again, and you'll see these little we call those selection nodes right there, and this is called a Bezier curve, meaning we can go in and kind of change the amplitude of that curve by grabbing these little handles. We'll go more over that in the upcoming chapters, so, but that's a great way to control how those lines work. You can kind of see, I'm just going to kind of go in and kind of mess with that. I'll do it, undo there, didn't want to do that. You'll see that this kind of looks like some of the samples that are in your lesson plan. So let's take a look. I'm just going to see what I got so far. It's looking pretty crazy. So I'm going to go in and just bring the opacity down there as well. Kind of give it some character. Okay. The last layer I'm going to work with is the shapes layer. So I'm going to create some shapes to go on top of these and then create some interest. So use some circle tool, and I'm just going to create 3 or 4, maybe 5 circles. Yeah, something like that. I'll let that one bleed off the bottom. Now, right now you'll see, let's turn these layers off. You see, there's the background layers on, and my shapes layers on. And I want to select this, and I want to see what I got. Well, I got a no fill with a blue stroke. Well, I want to put a fill in there, so let's make this like an orangish fill, something like that. And I'm going to do that same kind of, I don't know, reddish orange, maybe a little darker, right? And maybe a little yellowish here, something about like that. Again, I'm just double clicking to get the rainbow so I can pick me a color. Nice, bright. Let's something about like that. All right, so those look pretty good. Let's turn these layers on. And I'm just going to go in and I'm going to bring the opacity down on these just a little bit. Maybe not quite so much in some. You know, kind of go in and kind of experiment a little bit. Yeah, looking pretty good. And then I'm going to, I don't know, I might want to make that one a little bigger. Move this one to the center. Now when you draw a circle, if you hold the shift key down, it will make it a perfect circle, or you can make them different shapes similar to that. We click on it, scale it a little bit, yeah, something like that. All right, it's looking pretty interesting. Let's go ahead and lock that. Now I'm not really liking the colors here, so I think I want to go with a red fill. So I can change these at any time. Yeah, that looks a little better. So let's go with reds on this layer, maybe some pinks, just to give it a little extra oomph in the color area. There we go. Yeah, that looks a lot better. So I'm going to mess with my colors a little bit. Make this one a really bright red. Okay, it's looking pretty good. We'll go ahead and save it. Make sure we save. There we go. So you can see we can do a lot with just the simple tools that we have in our palette here. We'll talk more about some of these other tools, but the most important are the selection tools. And if we're drawing lines, well, we could use all of these tools here. These are really for shapes. These are for lines, okay? So get in and kind of experiment with your lines and have fun with this little assignment. All right, so let me go ahead and save, and I'll go ahead and export this so I can put it up on the portal. I'm going to save it as assignment. Oops, assignment 2 JPEG. I'm just going to write right over the top of that other one. Yeah. Take it a minute to export. We have a lot of layers. The more layers you have, the longer it's going to take to export and save. So let's quit Illustrator. And there you go. There's your assignment number 2.